Hello and welcome to week 10-11 of English 120. This week we're going to be reading The Valley of the Moon, Book 2. I'd like you to read chapters 1 through 9. Also, please read The Bedford Researcher, chapter 4, because that's what we're going to be working from on our research project. This week's conversation will focus on the chapters you read in The Valley of the Moon. There'll be study questions for you to look at and answer. In comp class, you're going to work on correct paraphrasing and summarizing. So when you're working with your sources, you know how to restate what's being said. And in your research journal, you're going to work on developing a position statement, which is basically a rough draft of your thesis statement. And you're going to do some work working with the sources that you've chosen to begin working with. Before we begin, though, just one second. Before we begin, though, I just wanted to bring to your attention, some of you might find this interesting. I found a friend of mine sent me a link to these photos of what San Francisco looked like 100 years ago when it hosted the World's Fair. And this is something that Jack London and Charmian London attended. There's no pictures of them, but it'll kind of give you an idea of what people looked like during that time period and what San Francisco looked like. So for this week, we're going to be reading chapters 1 through 9 in Book 2 of The Valley of the Moon. These are really wonderful chapters. They talk about when Billy and Saxon are first married. Saxon is really into being a housewife and taking care of Billy. And then it also talks about one of the first characters that's a helper, helping Billy and Saxon along on their journey to find the Valley of the Moon. And this first helper is called Mercedes Higgins. She's the next door neighbor to them in their first house, and she tells them a lot. She reveals a lot of information to Saxon. This is the part of the story that, according to Cosmopolitan magazine, was too racy and had to be cut out. The version that you're reading is the one that's the full text, so you get to read the racy parts. You probably won't be able to even identify which parts those are, because things have really changed since the early 1900s as far as what is racy and what's not. One of the things you want to pay attention to are what kind of ideology is Mercedes talking about? She describes a world where jobs are considered bones and men fight for them. And this is a really important phrase that's going to reoccur through this section. I'd like you to think about how Mercedes feels about men and the conquering of men. Then I want you also to think about, when you're reading, the story comes up about Bill Murphy. Now, Bill Murphy is somebody that Billy used to fight with, and it's an important story because it talks a lot about Billy's feelings about prize fighting and his silk, like his vitality, right, that he feels is being taken away, and what role the crowd played in that. Also, there's some major things that happen to Billy and Saxon in chapter 5, that things that are going to happen, 4 eventful things that happen. And I want you to really pay attention to these events and how they deeply affect their lives. Tom, Saxon's sister, comes up with this idea of his dream place. And it really plants a seed in Saxon's mind. I want you to pay attention to this, because this helps encourage them in the next part of their journey. The mood of the novel is going to change. It's been very happy up to this point, and when we get to chapters 8 and 9, the mood begins to drastically change. Finally, chapter 9 is one of the most important chapters of the book. At this point, bad things have begun to really happen in Billy and Saxon's life, and it all comes to a head in chapter 9. It's really important to pay attention to this riot. It's who's throwing the first stones? It's these little children. And I want you to think about what that tells us about society. If you want to do some outside reading, there's a wonderful story by Shirley Jackson called The Lottery, which is about a similar situation. So if you want to read that and you're looking for extra credit, you can read it and then compare the scene in chapter 9 to The Lottery by Shirley Jackson in a one-page response that you email to me. You get 5 points extra credit for doing that. Finally, in the end, Saxon keeps saying over and over that jobs are bones, and I want you to think about why she's saying that and what it means. All right, guys. So, in chapter 4 of the Bedford Researcher, you're going to be thinking about working with these sources. So hopefully by this time, you should have at least 3 to 6 academic sources. These are sources written by people who are scholars in the field that they're writing about. Like I have a PhD in American literature, so I can write about American literature with authority because I've studied it for many years. When you are reading these sources, and if you have questions about how to identify an academic source, please feel free to contact me, stop by my office hours, send me an email, or work with the librarians at the college. Usually it needs to be author. You want to make sure the author of the source is available. Typically just Wikipedia pages or sources like that are not academic sources because they are not peer-reviewed. They're not authored by people that you can see the name of the person who wrote it. And you want to make sure that that person is legitimate, that they have experience in what they're writing about. When you read these sources, and I do encourage you by this time to have some sort of system of taking notes on your sources, either note cards or a little, I like to use a spiral notebook, and take notes on the things that you're reading. When you read your sources, you want to read critically, so actively, the way we've been doing. You're going to use your research question to help you read. You're going to try to find the answer to your research question. Now, for your research prospectus, you came up with 3 different research questions. You want to narrow that down to 1 and start really looking for sources that help you solve that research question. Because your research question focuses your attention on your issue, and it provides a foundation for your search plan and directs you to specific sources as you collect information. You're going to use your research question to help you develop a position statement. That's going to be a rough draft of your thesis statement, which will be a big part of your paper. So read with a critical attitude, approach a source with your writing situation in mind, mark and annotate your sources, take notes, and cite your source. Write down where the source came, what the source is, so you can write MLA citations later and be able to find the source again. So this week, all you're going to be doing is finding your sources, making sure you have at least 6 to work with next week when you write your annotated bibliography. Your research journal is going to be 3 sections, and all of these will be about working with your sources. So instead of giving us a list of sources, you're going to be talking to us about, first you're going to go from research question to position statement. So you're going to write your current research question, choose one of the 3 that you have. Then you're going to brainstorm or free write in response to your research question what you think the answer is. And then select the response that best reflects your current understanding of the conversation you've decided to join. If appropriate, combine responses into one position statement and write your position statement. Now, more information is available in Chapter 4 of the Bedford Researcher. Please make sure you've read that chapter before you begin working on your research journal. Then, for each of your sources, and you should have at least 3, I want you to answer the following questions. Are the information, ideas, and arguments in the source relevant to my research question and position statement? Does this source present information, ideas, and arguments that make me reconsider my research question or position statement? Does this source provide any new information, ideas, or arguments? Does this source offer a new perspective on the conversation? And please don't just answer yes, no. Try to give us an answer that involves information, because this is supposed to help you get more in touch with your sources so you can work from them next week. You're also going to try to see how the sources are speaking to each other. So in your research log, so hopefully your spiral notebook or your note cards, um, sorry, um, sorry, just one second. You should have you should have uh, you should identify connections amongst your sources. Do your sources tend to fall into one or more genres, such as scholarly articles, books, blog entries, or web pages? If so, try to identify the most common genres. Do your sources tend to be primary or secondary sources, or a mix of the two types? What do you think why do you think you're seeing this pattern? So primary sources would be like a Shakespearean play. A secondary source would be someone writing about a Shakespearean play. Um, do the authors of your sources tend to agree? Um, sorry. Do the authors of your sources tend to agree with each other, disagree, fall into various groups? Please describe the pattern you see. Does the information in one or more sources contradict the information in another source? If so, where are you seeing the contradiction, and what do you think is causing it? Do authors tend to rely on similar arguments and evidence? If so, describe the arguments and evidence. Are any sources cited frequently by the author of your sources? If so, identify the source. What interpretive frameworks are found in your sources? Are any of them used in more than one source? If so, why do you think they are relying on this framework or frameworks? So this will help, part 3 is going to help you identify the conversation that's happening amongst all your sources, and it will help you identify a place to enter that conversation. Finally, this week in comp class, you're going to complete correct paraphrasing and summarizing. Everything for this week, except for your conversation, which is due weeks from Saturday, is due April 14th at 11:59 p.m. So you have a few extra days this week. Next week, we're going to be diving into more of Book 2. You're going to learn about MLA document format proficiency, and you'll be learning about your annotated bibliography, which will be due at the end of the following week, week 12. So as I said, your conversation is due on the Saturday before the 14th, and everything else is due April 14th. You have a little extra time this week because we have spring break, but we'll be back on our regular schedule. If you have any questions, please contact me, and I look forward to seeing you guys online.